stood in the center of the grand amphitheater and felt the weight of 5,000 alien eyes upon him. The massive chamber orbited a dying star, its walls made of crystal that caught and reflected the neutron star's pale light. He had stood in this exact spot many times before, representing humanity to the Galactic Council. But today was different. Today would be the last time. The vote had just finished. Resolution 47 Alpha had passed with an overwhelming majority. Humanity was being stripped of its voting rights, its trade privileges, and its protection under the military alliance. They were being reduced to observer status only. In simple terms, humans could watch but never participate. They could speak but never be heard. He was 63 years old. He had spent 12 years as humanity's ambassador to the Council. He had learned 17 alien languages. He had negotiated treaties, settled disputes, and built friendships across the stars. And now, in one afternoon, all of that work had been thrown away. Behind him stood Dr. Han, humanity's chief science advisor. She was younger than barely 40, but her hair had started turning gray from stress. For 3 years, she had been warning the Council about the void rifts. These were tears in the fabric of space itself, growing larger every month. She had presented data, run simulations, and begged them to listen. The Council had laughed at her. Ambassador spoke of the Empire. His voice boomed through the chamber, translated instantly into every language present. Do you accept the Council's judgment? Looked at the species had been traveling the stars for 3 million years. They saw humans as children, barely 400 years old in space. To them, humanity was a baby trying to teach mathematics to scholars. I accept that the vote has been taken, said carefully. His voice was quiet but clear. However, I must speak one final time about the void rifts. Groans echoed through the chamber. Several rose to leave. Others activated privacy shields around their seats, making it clear they would not listen. The rifts are growing, continued, his voice steady. Our scientists have discovered that they are caused by cumulative damage from FTL travel, quantum communications, and dimensional manipulation. Every jump you make, every message you send across space, it tears at the universe just a little. For millions of years, this damage has been building up. Now it's reaching a breaking point. Enough, slammed his hand against his podium. We have heard these foolish theories for years. Our own scientists, with millions of years more experience than your species, have studied these so-called rifts. They are natural phenomena, nothing more. They pose no threat. Dr. Han stepped forward. If I may show you the latest readings. You may not, cut her off. The Council has voted. Humanity's supposed expertise in this matter is not recognized. Your technology is unproven. Your science is primitive. This debate is closed. Felt something inside him go very still and very quiet. He looked around the amphitheater at the assembled species. Some looked uncomfortable. Many looked bored. A few seemed genuinely amused by humanity's humiliation. These were supposed to be allies. These were supposed to be partners in exploring and protecting the galaxy. Captain Lee stood at the back of the human delegation. He commanded the flagship Resilience, the pride of humanity's small fleet. He caught Sai's eye and gave a tiny nod. The captain knew what was coming. They had discussed this possibility many times. Then I invoke Article 3 of the Galactic Charter, said clearly. The chamber fell silent. Even those who had been leaving stopped. Article 3. His voice carried surprise and something else. Amusement, perhaps. The right of voluntary withdrawal. Ambassador, surely you're not serious. I'm completely serious, replied. Humanity came to the stars hopping to find wisdom, friendship, and partnership. We have found bureaucracy, arrogance, and contempt. We offered our help with the greatest crisis your civilizations have ever faced, and you mocked us for it. We offered our technology, and you called it worthless. We offered our knowledge, and you laughed. He paused, letting his words sink in. You're done offering. Humanity hereby formally withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. We will remove all our personnel, ships, and equipment from Council space within 30 days. We will honor all existing contracts until their completion, but we will sign no new ones. We will take nothing that is not ours, and we will leave everything in perfect condition. You cannot be serious, another said. You will return within a decade begging to rejoin. Where will you go? Who will trade with you? Who will protect you? Smiled, but there was no warmth in it. We will protect ourselves. We will trade among our own colonies, and we will not return until you are ready to treat us as equals. This is foolishness, declared. But if humanity wishes to isolate itself, we will not stop you. Perhaps a few years alone will teach you humility. Perhaps, agreed, or perhaps it will teach you to listen. He turned and walked toward the exit. Dr. Han and Captain Lee fell in step beside him. The rest of the human delegation followed. None of them looked back. The walk through the council station took 20 minutes. Everywhere they went, aliens stopped and stared. News of the withdrawal was already spreading. Some looked shocked, others looked pleased. A few looked worried, though couldn't tell why. They reached the docking bay where the Resilience waited. The ship was beautiful, built with human hands and human dreams. It gleamed under the harsh lights of the station. "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" Dr. Han asked quietly as they boarded. "I don't know," admitted, "but staying wasn't working. Maybe this will make them pay attention." "Or maybe we just walked away from the only allies we had," Captain Lee said, but he didn't sound like he disagreed with the decision. The Resilience departed 3 hours later. Over the next 30 days, every human ship, station, and outpost in Council space packed up and left. They were efficient and professional. They left behind detailed instructions for maintaining all the joint facilities. They fulfilled every obligation. And then they were gone. Stood on the bridge of the Resilience as they crossed the boundary into independent human space. Behind them, Council territory stretched across thousands of light years. Ahead lay the human colonies, small and scattered but growing. Dr. Han sat at her station, monitoring the void rifts through long-range sensors. Her face went pale. "Ambassador," she said quietly, "you should see this." Looked at her screen. The rifts, which had been stable for months, were beginning to expand. The rate was small, barely measurable, but it was there, growing, accelerating. "We were holding them back," Dr. Han whispered. "Our stabilization technology, the fields we had set up around the major rifts, we were the only ones doing anything, and we didn't even realize we were making a difference." "How long?" asked. "Until what?" "Until they notice." Dr. Han studied the data. 3 months, maybe 4. Then the expansion will become obvious even to their sensors. Nodded slowly. He should have felt satisfaction. He should have felt vindicated. Instead, he felt only a deep, hollow sadness. "Record this in the log," he said, "date and time stamped. I want there to be a record that we knew, that we warned them." Dr. Han made the entry. Her hands shook slightly as she typed. "We were the patch holding it together. They just pulled us off the wound." The Resilience sailed on into the darkness, carrying humanity away from the Council and toward an uncertain future. Behind them, invisible and ignored, the universe began to tear itself apart. 3 months had passed since humanity left the Galactic Council. On the human colony of Nova Sol, Director stood in the Dimensional Research Institute and watched the data streams flowing across her monitors. She was Dr. Han's best student, and right now, she was seeing exactly what her mentor had predicted. The void rifts were growing faster. "How bad is it?" asked Admiral Park, standing behind her. He commanded humanity's defense fleet now, a promotion that came when the old command structure reorganized after the withdrawal. "Bad and getting worse," replied. She pulled up a star map. Red marks indicated rift locations. 3 months ago there had been 23 known rifts. Now there were 47. They're not just growing, they're multiplying. In Council space, the problems were becoming impossible to ignore. A cargo ship called the Fortune's Dream had disappeared near the system. At first, officials assumed it was pirates or mechanical failure. Then a passenger liner vanished in the same area. Then a military patrol went to investigate and reported strange readings before their transmissions cut off. The Empire sent a science vessel to study the phenomenon. The ship got too close to a rift and experienced what they called a temporal anomaly. When it limped back to base, the crew had aged 30 years in 3 hours. The captain was now an old man. The engineer was dead of old age. The ship's logs made no sense, recording events that hadn't happened and conversations no one remembered having. Called an emergency session. Representatives from all major species gathered once again in the Grand Amphitheater. This time, no humans attended. The empty seats where humanity's delegation once sat seemed very obvious. "We need to understand these rifts," announced. "I am authorizing the deployment of our most advanced probe technology." The Celestial Dominion, one of the oldest races in the galaxy, sent a probe equipped with sensors that had been refined over 10 million years. The probe approached a medium-sized rift in the Antares sector. It transmitted data for 7 seconds. Then it simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, not damaged, gone as if it had never been built. They sent another probe. This one came back, but the data it carried was corrupted. The information didn't follow the laws of physics, numbers that shouldn't exist, measurements of impossible things. The scientists who tried to analyze the data went mad trying to make sense of it. 3 of them had to be hospitalized. Meanwhile, in independent human space, things were very different. The colonies had activated their rift stabilization technology the moment they left Council territory. Around every human world, invisible fields maintained the structure of spacetime. The rifts in human space weren't shrinking, but they weren't growing either. Captain Wu Jin piloted his merchant ship, the Silver Dawn, along the edge of human territory. He ran trade routes between the colonies, carrying supplies and news. His ship was old but reliable, and Wu Jin knew every route through human space by heart. He was passing near the neutral zone when his sensors picked up a distress signal. It was from a council ship, broadcasting in the Celestial Dominion's language. The message was simple: hull breach, life support failing, 32 survivors, please help. Wu Jin should have ignored it. Human ships weren't supposed to enter council space anymore, but he had been a rescue pilot in his youth before he became a merchant. Some instincts never died. "This is the Silver Dawn responding to distress call," he broadcast. "Hold on, we're coming." The ship was called the Eternal Light, and it was in bad shape. A rift had opened near a council station, and the Eternal Light had been caught in the edge of its expansion. Half the ship was gone, simply erased from existence. The survivors huddled in what remained, their elegant ship reduced to a floating wreck. Wu Jin brought them aboard. The Dominion crew members were tall and graceful, with skin that shimmered like oil on water. Their officer, whose name translated roughly as Bright Morning, looked at Wu Jin with something like shock. "You came," Bright Morning said. "Even after everything, you came." "You were in trouble," Wu Jin replied simply. "We don't leave people to die." As the Silver Dawn headed back toward Nova Sol, Bright Morning watched the sensor displays. He could see the rift stabilization fields surrounding human space. They were obvious once you knew what to look for, like a dome of safety in the chaos. "Your technology works," he said quietly. "It actually works." "Of course it works," Wu Jin said. "We wouldn't have offered it to the council if it didn't work." Bright Morning closed his eyes. "We were fools." Director met them at Nova Sol's main station. She listened to Bright Morning's story of the destroyed station, the expanding rift, and the casualties. Hundreds dead, thousands displaced, and it was getting worse. "I need to speak with your leaders," Bright Morning said. "The council needs this technology." Admiral Park arrived within the hour. He sat across from Bright Morning in a conference room, with and several other officials present. "The council rejected our help," Park said bluntly. "They called our science primitive. They called us children." "We were wrong," Bright Morning admitted. "Catastrophically wrong, and now my people are dying because of that mistake." "How many species are affected?" asked. "All of them. Every species in council space is reporting rift-related incidents. The Thoros Collective lost a colony world last week, an entire planet simply swallowed by a rift that expanded without warning. 15 billion people. Gone." The room fell silent. 15 billion. The number was too large to comprehend. "Has the council sent an official request for assistance?" Park asked. Bright Morning hesitated. "They sent a request for technological assistance. They offer renewed trade agreements and restored status." "But no apology," Park said. "It wasn't a question." "The council finds it difficult to admit mistakes," Bright Morning said quietly. Admiral Park stood and walked to the window. Outside, Nova Sol glittered against the darkness of space. It was beautiful and peaceful and safe, protected by the same technology the council had rejected. "I need to consult with our civilian leadership," he said finally. "This isn't a military decision." Over the next week, humanity debated. Some argued they should help immediately. Others wanted nothing to do with the council. The arguments were passionate but respectful, conducted in assembly halls and public forums across every human colony. Ambassador, now retired and living on Earth, watched the debates from his home. He had thought he was done with politics, but the government asked him to address the colonies. His words would carry weight. He recorded a message from his garden, sitting under the blue sky of Earth. "The council treated us badly," he said. "They were arrogant, they were dismissive, they were wrong. But does that mean we should let billions die? I don't know the answer. I only know that we are better than they were. We are better than the people who laughed at our warnings. So we must decide. Do we help because it's right, or do we refuse because we're angry?" The vote was held across all human colonies. It was close but clear. Humanity would help, but not on the council's terms. They would create safe zones and humanitarian corridors. They would save refugees and protect civilian populations. But they would not give the council the stabilization technology. Not yet. Not until the council was ready to be true partners. Director began organizing the humanitarian response. They would deploy mobile stabilization units along evacuation routes. Council citizens could flee through human-protected space to reach safety. It wasn't enough to save everyone, but it would save millions. Captain Wu Jin volunteered to pilot one of the first humanitarian missions. His ship would enter council space, mark a safe corridor, and guide refugees through. "Why are you doing this?" Bright Morning asked him. "You don't owe us anything." Wu Jin thought about that. "Maybe not, but we owe ourselves. We left the council because they wouldn't listen. We can't become the people who won't help." The council sent another message to humanity. This time it wasn't addressed to the government. It was addressed directly to Ambassador, marked personal and urgent. Opened it in his garden. It was from himself. Ambassador, the message began. I write to you not as a but as someone who is beginning to understand what we have lost. The rifts are consuming us. Our scientists cannot stop them. Our technology cannot contain them. And every day more of my people die. I was wrong to dismiss your warnings. I was wrong to mock your science. I was wrong to treat humanity as lesser. These mistakes have cost billions of lives. I do not ask for forgiveness. I ask only that you help us find a way forward. Read the message 3 times. It wasn't an official apology. It wasn't everything humanity had asked for, but it was something. It was a beginning. He sent a reply. Humanity will help where we can. But know this, when this crisis ends, we will not return to the old ways. Either we build something new together or we remain apart. The choice, as it has always been, is yours. Far away at the edge of council space, another rift opened. This one was larger than any before, and it was growing fast. 8 months had passed since humanity walked away from the Galactic Council. The galaxy was falling apart. Dr. Song stood in her laboratory on Nova Sol and studied the biological samples in front of her. She was someone who studied alien life forms. What she was seeing made her hands shake. The rifts are affecting living tissue, she reported to Director. Species that get too close to the rifts start to experience cellular breakdown. Their DNA becomes unstable. It's like their bodies forget how to be alive. 15% of the galaxy was now marked as red zone. These were areas where the fabric of reality had become so damaged that nothing could survive. Ships that entered red zones never came out. Colonies in those regions had to be evacuated, and many weren't evacuated in time. The Thoros Collective, one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy, lost 3 more colony worlds. This time everyone watched it happen. The broadcast went out live across all council channels. A rift opened in the Thoros home system. It grew. It expanded. It consumed 3 planets in 14 hours. 12 billion people died, and there was nothing anyone could do but watch. The death toll across the galaxy was now in the hundreds of billions. Entire species were being wiped out. The smaller civilizations suffered worst because they didn't have the ships or resources to evacuate. They died in their homes, watching the sky tear itself apart. The Galactic Council sent a delegation to human space. It was led by himself, the same person who had mocked Ambassador all those months ago. He came with gifts, trade agreements, and promises. Everything except the one thing humanity had asked for, genuine respect. Young diplomat Ara met them at Unity Point, a neutral station on the edge of human territory. She was only 32 years old, but she had been chosen to represent humanity because she represented the new generation. She had never served under the council, so she carried no old grudges. She greeted him politely, "Welcome to Unity Point." Looked older than he had 8 months ago. The weight of billions of deaths showed in his face. He was not alone. Representatives from 6 major species accompanied him, all looking desperate. Ambassador said, "Thank you for meeting with us. We come to discuss humanity's return to the council." "We're not interested in returning," Ara said simply, "but we are interested in helping. Please sit. Let's talk about what's possible." The negotiations lasted 3 days. Ara presented humanity's terms. They were specific and non-negotiable. First, the council must issue a full public apology, acknowledging humanity's scientific contributions and admitting their mistakes. Second, humanity must be given complete access to all council databases for research purposes. Third, humanity must receive permanent voting seats in the new council, with representation proportional to their population. Fourth, the council must provide reparations to cover the cost of humanitarian aid humanity had been providing. Fifth, all species must agree to adopt sustainable dimensional practices, following human guidelines for FTL travel and quantum communications. Listen to each point. When Ara finished, he was silent for a long moment. "These terms are too harsh," he said finally. "The council cannot accept them." "People are dying," Ara said quietly. "Billions have already died, and you think an apology is too harsh." "You don't understand," another interjected. "This was N of the Celestial Dominion. We are ancient civilizations. We have ruled the galaxy for millions of years. To bow to a species barely 400 years old would destroy our authority. Other species would question our leadership." Ara felt her patience wearing thin. "Your authority is already destroyed. Your leadership failed. That's why we're here, isn't it? Because your ancient wisdom couldn't save you." "You're asking us to humiliate ourselves," said. "I'm asking you to tell the truth," Ara replied. "Is that really so difficult?" The debate went in circles for hours. The elder races refused to bend. Their pride, even in the face of extinction, would not allow them to admit they had been so completely wrong. On the second day, Engineer Bay arrived at Unity Point. He was the man who had designed humanity's rift stabilization technology. He was quiet and thoughtful, preferring numbers to words, but he had asked to address the council delegation. "I want to show you something," Bay said. He pulled up a holographic display showing the galaxy. Red zones marked the areas already lost. Yellow zones showed regions experiencing instability. Green zones were still safe, mostly human space. "This is the galaxy now," he said, "and this is the projection for 6 months from now if nothing changes." The display shifted. The red zones expanded dramatically, swallowing nearly half the galaxy. Hundreds of worlds disappeared into the red. "And this is 1 year from now. 3/4 of the galaxy gone. Only scattered pockets of green remained, mostly around human colonies. And this is 18 months from now." The entire galaxy was red, except for a small sphere around human space. "You see," Bay said softly, "we can save ourselves. Our stabilization technology is enough to protect human space indefinitely, but we can't save everyone. Without council cooperation, without a unified effort to deploy stabilization networks across all inhabited space, most of the galaxy will become uninhabitable." The delegation sat in stunned silence. "You're saying you can save yourself, but you're choosing not to save us," N demanded. "No," Bay replied. "I'm saying we can't save you if you won't work with us. Stabilization technology requires precise calibration for each region of space. It requires coordination between species. It requires trust. You're asking us to give you a tool you refuse to accept so you can continue operating the way you always have. That won't work. The galaxy has changed. Either we change with it or we die." Ara watched the council delegation carefully. She could see them struggling with the reality of their situation. Pride versus survival. Authority versus extinction. On the third day, delivered the council's final answer. "We cannot accept your terms," he said. "The council appreciates humanity's humanitarian efforts, but we must find our own solution to this crisis. Our scientists are working on alternative technologies. We are confident we can stabilize the rifts without surrendering our sovereignty." Ara felt something cold settle in her chest. "You're willing to let more billions die because you won't admit you were wrong." "We are willing to preserve the integrity of the Galactic Council," said stiffly. "That must be our first priority." "Then we have nothing more to discuss," Ara said. She stood. "Humanity will continue to maintain humanitarian corridors for refugees. We will save everyone we can, but we will not provide stabilization technology to the Council until you meet our terms. I'm sorry it had to end this way." The delegation left Unity Point within the hour. Ara watched their ships disappear into the darkness and felt a deep sense of failure. She had been so certain that reason would prevail, that facing extinction would break through the Council's pride. She had been wrong. She sent a report back to Earth. Ambassador, still in retirement, recorded a response to be broadcast across all human colonies. "The Council has refused our help," he said from his garden. "They would rather die as they lived in arrogance than live in humility, so we must make a choice. Do we give them the technology anyway? Do we save them despite themselves? Or do we hold to our principles and let events unfold? I have thought about this question for days, and I believe we must hold firm, not out of spite or revenge, but because giving in now would doom us all. The Council would take our technology and change nothing. They would patch this crisis and continue their old ways until the next crisis comes, and it will come because the underlying problems remain. So we will save who we can save. We will protect refugees. We will offer shelter and hope. But we will not enable the Council to destroy themselves more slowly. If they want our help, they know what they must do." The message sparked intense debate across human colonies. Many agreed with, many others argued that principles meant nothing to the dead. The argument raged for weeks, but the government's position did not change. Engineer Bay worked with Admiral Park to expand the humanitarian corridors. They deployed new stabilization arrays along evacuation routes, creating highways of safety through the chaos. Millions of refugees began flowing through these corridors toward human space. General Nam took command of the refugee operations. His military forces, trained for war, became the largest humanitarian organization in galactic history. They built shelter stations, distributed food and supplies, and kept order among populations fleeing disaster. In the protected zones, something unexpected happened. Species that had been enemies for thousands of years found themselves sheltering side by side. Ancient grudges meant nothing when your world was being swallowed by a rift. Humans mediated disputes and enforced peace with firm but fair authority. Dr. Song documented what she called the new society. In the refugee camps and shelter stations, old hierarchies were meaningless. The ancient races who had ruled the council found themselves receiving food from younger species. Pride gave way to survival. Meanwhile, the elder races made their final attempt to solve the crisis alone. The Empire, the Celestial Dominion, and the Thoros Collective pooled their resources. They gathered their most advanced technology and their greatest scientists. They would seal the rifts through pure force, using energy weapons and quantum manipulation on a scale never before attempted. They chose a major rift in the outer arm as their test target. It was large but stable, a perfect candidate for their demonstration. If they succeeded, it would prove they didn't need humanity. If they succeeded, their authority would be restored. Every species in the galaxy watched. The broadcasts went out across all channels. This was the moment the ancient races would show that their wisdom still mattered, that age and experience still meant something. The combined fleet assembled around the rift, 300 ships carrying the most powerful weapons ever built. At precisely the calculated moment, they fired everything at once. The energy release was visible across 17 star systems, a pulse of light so bright it entire stars. For a moment the rift seemed to shrink. For a moment it looked like success. Then the rift exploded. There was no other word for it. The rift didn't just expand. It detonated, releasing energy that had been compressed into impossible dimensions. The blast consumed all 300 ships instantly. Then it kept going. 3 entire sectors collapsed into unreality. 4 civilizations, their home worlds, their colonies, their billions of people, simply ceased to exist. The event was visible from half the galaxy, a wound in space that bled colors that shouldn't exist, and it was growing. Ambassador watched from Earth and felt tears on his face. Not tears of vindication, tears of grief, because he had been right and being right had cost billions more lives. 14 months after humanity walked away from the Galactic Council, half the galaxy was dead. General Nam stood in the command center on Unity Point and watched the refugee counts climb higher every hour. His forces were processing 5 million evacuees per day, and it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. "We need more ships," said his logistics officer, a young woman named Park Hay. "We need more stations, more supplies, more everything. The numbers are just too big." Nam knew she was right. Humanity's entire population was barely 30 billion spread across 200 colonies. They were trying to save a galaxy of trillions with resources meant for billions. It was like trying to empty an ocean with a bucket. On Earth, Professor Shin worked day and night in the archives building. She was a historian, and she had taken on a task that haunted her dreams. She was recording the names of lost civilizations. 300 species had been wiped out so far. Their worlds were gone. Their cultures were gone. Everything they had built or discovered or created was lost forever. Shin was determined that at least their names would survive. She recorded their histories as best she could from surviving databases. The In, who had written poetry that took 1,000 years to complete. The T, whose cities floated on clouds and sang in the wind. The N, who had discovered 17 forms of mathematics unknown to any other species. All gone, all erased, all forgotten except for the words Shin typed into her archive. The refugee camps around human space had become cities. Millions of people from hundreds of species lived in temporary shelters that were becoming permanent homes. Food was rationed, water was recycled, space was tight, but nobody was dying from rifts, and that made it paradise compared to council space. A former council military commander named helped organize the refugee populations. He had lost his home world and his family to a rift 6 months ago. Now he worked 18 hours a day making sure other refugees had shelter and food. He spoke 17 languages and knew how to deal with species who didn't trust each other. "We're building something here," he told General Nam one day. "In these camps, ancient enemies are learning to live side by side. The old hatreds don't matter anymore when you're all refugees together." Nam saw it too. The Nthe, who had been at war for 3,000 years, now shared meal distribution duties. The who never spoke to lesser species learned to ask for help politely because nobody got special treatment in the camps. Pride was a luxury the galaxy could no longer afford. In council space, what remained of the government was falling apart. The member species were breaking away, each trying to negotiate separate deals with humanity. The younger races came first, admitting their mistakes and begging for help. Humanity accepted them, deploying stabilization technology to protect their worlds. But the elder races held out. The Empire, the Celestial Dominion, and the Thoros Collective still refused to apologize. Even as their territories collapsed around them, they clung to the belief that they would find their own solution, that ancient wisdom would somehow prevail. Then came the message that changed everything. It was broadcast on all channels, marked urgent and priority 1, appeared on screens across the galaxy. He looked like he had aged 20 years. His face was gray. His eyes were hollow. When he spoke, his voice broke. This is of the Empire. I'm speaking to all council species and to humanity. I'm speaking as someone who has failed, who has led billions to their deaths through arrogance and stupidity, who refused to listen when listening could have saved everything. He paused, composing himself. The council was wrong. I was wrong. We dismissed humanity's warnings. We mocked their science. We treated them as children when they were the only ones who understood what was happening. And now, because of our pride, 300 civilizations are extinct. Trillions are dead. Half the galaxy is uninhabitable. Another pause, seemed to be struggling with every word. We were wrong, and I am sorry. I am so deeply, profoundly sorry. I am sorry to humanity for our treatment of them. I am sorry to my own people for failing to protect them. I am sorry to every species suffering because of decisions I supported. And I am begging, not as but as someone who has nothing left but regret, please help us. Please save what can still be saved. We will accept any terms. We will meet any conditions. Just please help us. The message ended. For a moment, the entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Ambassador watched from his garden on Earth. He had been asked to respond, to speak for humanity one more time. He recorded his message carefully, knowing that his words would be remembered forever. I accept your apology, not because it changes what happened, but because it acknowledges the truth. Billions died because we were not heard. That cannot be undone, but more billions can still be saved. Humanity will deploy full stabilization technology across all remaining space. No conditions, no negotiations, because when the choice is between principle and survival, survival must come first. We will save everyone we can save because that is what humanity does. We help. But know this, when this crisis ends, the old council is finished. We will not return to a system where age matters more than wisdom, where pride matters more than truth. Either we build something new together or we remain separate. The choice remains yours. Within hours, the deployment began. Engineer Bay led a fleet of 10,000 human ships equipped with rift stabilizers. They spread across the galaxy in a carefully planned pattern, like doctors treating a massive wound. Each ship carried the technology to stabilize a region of space. Each crew was trained to set up and calibrate the systems. Director coordinated from Nova Sol, monitoring the deployment through massive holographic displays. Every stabilizer that came online appeared as a green dot on her map. Slowly, sector by sector, the galaxy was being saved. But it was not fast enough. The rifts were still spreading. For every region they stabilized, another 2 fell to the red zones. They were fighting a race against time, and time was winning. Captain Wu Jin piloted his merchant ship turned rescue vessel through the chaos. He had made 47 trips into council space, evacuating civilians and marking safe routes. His ship had battle scars now, damage from rift turbulence and close calls, but he kept going back. On his 48th trip, he encountered something that would haunt him forever. A colony world called Hope was in the path of an expanding rift. The planet held 3 billion people. Human ships arrived to evacuate them, but there wasn't enough time. They could save maybe 500,000 before the rift arrived. Wu Jin worked with the local authorities to identify who would get on the ships. Children first, then parents, then essential workers, then random lottery for the rest. It was an impossible choice, deciding who lived and who died. The people left behind watched the ships leave, knowing they had minutes to live. Wu Jin's last view of Hope was the rift sweeping across the planet's surface. 3 billion lives gone in seconds. The weight of it crushed something inside him. He would make many more rescue runs, would save thousands more people, but he would never forget those he couldn't save. Admiral Park organized the defense of the stabilization network. The arrays were vulnerable during setup, when they were at their weakest. He positioned human military vessels to protect each installation, buying time for the engineers to complete their work. It was the strangest war he had ever fought, a battle against the universe itself. Dr. Song studied the biological effects on the rescue workers. Human crews working near rifts were experiencing health problems, accelerated aging, cellular damage, mental stress from exposure to impossible physics. She developed treatments, but they were temporary. Every person who worked to save the galaxy was paying a price. 2 months into the deployment, the tide began to turn. Enough stabilizers were online that the rift expansion slowed, then stopped. Then, for the first time in over a year, began to shrink. The universe was being saved, meter by meter, sector by sector. But the cost was devastating. By the time the network was complete, 30% of the galaxy was permanently lost to the red zones. 400 species survived. 300 were extinct. Trillions were dead. The galaxy would never be the same. General Nam stood in the command center and watched the final stabilizer come online. The map showed green zones spreading across the surviving regions. Red zones marked what was lost forever. He thought about all the people he had tried to save, all the people he couldn't reach in time. "Is it over?" Parquet asked quietly. "The emergency is over," Nam replied, "but the work is just beginning." Because now they had to figure out how to rebuild a galaxy that had been broken beyond repair. 2 years after humanity walked away from the Galactic Council, the galaxy was stable but transformed. Director stood in the monitoring station on Nova Sol and studied the stabilization network displays. The green zones covered 70% of the galaxy. The red zones, 30% of everything that had existed, were sealed behind permanent dimensional barriers. Those regions were lost, perhaps forever. "How long until the red zones are safe?" asked the young technician. Pulled up the projections. 10,000 years, maybe more. The damage is too severe. We're not revering it, we're just preventing it from spreading further. The numbers were staggering. 400 species had survived. 300 species were extinct, their entire existence erased. Professor Shin had completed her archive of the lost civilizations. It filled an entire library. The galaxy had declared it a sacred text, required reading for anyone who wanted to understand what had happened. Shin herself had become something between a historian and a priestess. She traveled between the surviving worlds, speaking about the lost peoples. She made sure their stories were told, their achievements remembered, their existence honored. It was her life's work now, keeping the dead from being forgotten. The old Galactic Council was officially dissolved. In its place, a provisional government formed at Unity Point Station. This new government was different from the beginning. Voting rights weren't based on how old your species was or how much territory you controlled. They were based on population and contribution to the common good. Humanity held the largest voting bloc, simply because they had 30 billion people and had saved the galaxy. But Ambassador, brought out of retirement one final time, made sure humanity didn't dominate. He pushed for balanced representation, for equal voices, for shared leadership. "We didn't save the galaxy to rule it," he said during the founding assembly. "We saved it to give everyone a chance to build something better." Admiral Park became the supreme commander of the Galactic Defense Fleet. His job was to protect against future dimensional threats and ensure the stabilization network remained functional. The fleet was different now, composed of ships from dozens of species working together. The old rivalries had died with the old council. Captain Wu Jin, the merchant who had rescued that first Celestial Dominion ship, became Minister of Trade and Reconciliation. He understood both the practical needs of commerce and the emotional needs of reconciliation. He worked to rebuild trade routes and heal old wounds at the same time. Dr. Song was appointed Chief Medical Officer, studying the long-term effects of rift exposure and treating those who had suffered. Her research stations appeared across the surviving galaxy, offering help to anyone who needed it. Engineer Bay led the Stabilization Maintenance Corps, a permanent organization dedicated to monitoring and maintaining the network. It was the most important job in the galaxy, and he took it seriously. Every day, his teams checked thousands of stabilizers, making sure the protective fields held strong. The refugee camps gradually transformed into permanent settlements. People who had lost their homes built new ones. Species that had been scattered came together in mixed communities. The old boundaries and territories meant less now. What mattered was being in the green zones, being safe. The former council commander, who had become a refugee leader, now served on the provisional government. He represented the displaced populations, making sure their voices were heard in the new order. He spoke often about what he called the lessons of the camps. "In the refugee camps, we learned that survival requires cooperation," he said. "We learned that pride is a luxury. We learned that helping each other isn't weakness, it's strength. These lessons should guide us going forward." Did not receive the punishment many expected. He had been the face of the council's arrogance, the one who mocked humanity most loudly. Some called for his execution. Others wanted him imprisoned. But Ambassador spoke in his defense during the trial. "Made terrible mistakes," said, "but punishing individuals for systemic failures serves no purpose. The entire council system was broken, was just one part of that system, and in the end he found the courage to admit he was wrong. That matters." Was not imprisoned. Instead, he was sentenced to work in the memorial archives, helping Professor Shin document the lost civilizations. He spent his days reading about species that died because of decisions he supported. It was a punishment that would last the rest of his life, but it was also a form of redemption. The new government debated how to move forward. Some species wanted to ban all advanced technology, to return to simpler methods that wouldn't damage the universe. Others wanted to push ahead with research, trying to repair the damage instead of just containing it. Humanity advocated for a middle path, sustainable progress, careful study, constant vigilance. They developed new guidelines for FTL travel that minimized dimensional stress. They created protocols for quantum communication that reduced the cumulative damage. They proved that technology and safety could coexist. Ambassador Ara, who had negotiated with during those desperate days, became humanity's permanent representative to the new government. She was young but respected, representing a generation that had grown up during the crisis. She understood both the old mistakes and the new possibilities. 10 years after the withdrawal, a ceremony was held at Memorial Point, a station built at the boundary of the first red zone. Representatives from every surviving species gathered. It was the largest assembly since the crisis began. Ambassador Ara stood before the crowd and dedicated a monument. It was a simple pillar of stone, but its 3 inscriptions were written in every surviving language. 300 civilizations lost to pride and ignorance. 400 civilizations saved by humility and knowledge. One universe that will never be the same. As the ceremony ended, a young girl approached Captain Wu Jin. She was his daughter, born during the crisis years. She had grown up hearing stories of the evacuation runs and the desperate rescues. "Papa," she asked, "why didn't we help them sooner?" Wu Jin knelt to meet her eyes. "Because they had to want to be helped, and we had to learn that sometimes walking away is the only way to make someone see the truth." She thought about this. Will we ever make the same mistake? Probably, he admitted. That's why we built this monument, so that when we start thinking we have all the answers, we remember what happens when you stop asking questions. In deep space far from any inhabited world, Dr. Han maintained her research station. She was old now, her hair completely white, but she still monitored the rifts every day. The stabilization network held them in check, but they hadn't disappeared. They were dormant, waiting. She knew what others didn't or refused to accept. The rifts weren't gone. They would never be gone. The damage to the universe was permanent. Humanity and the other species would need to maintain the stabilization network forever. They had become the custodians of a broken galaxy. She made a final entry in her research log, knowing it would be read by scientists for generations to come. "We saved the galaxy by walking away and then coming back on our own terms. We proved that humanity belongs among the stars not because we're strong or wise, but because we're willing to be wrong to learn, and to do what's right even when it costs us. But the real test isn't behind us. It's ahead. We're responsible now, not just for ourselves, but for an entire universe that we helped break and then helped fix. Not as saviors, not as rulers, but as partners, as equals, as the species that taught the galaxy that being first doesn't matter as much as being right." Ambassador spent his final years in his garden on Earth. He was very old now, well past 90, but his mind remained sharp. Young diplomats came to visit him, seeking advice about the challenges they faced. He always told them the same thing. Listen more than you speak. Admit when you're wrong. Help others not because they deserve it, but because it's right. And never, ever let pride convince you that you have nothing left to learn. He died peacefully in his sleep at age 94. His funeral was attended by representatives from every surviving species. They came to honor the man who had walked away when walking away was the hardest thing to do. Engineer Bay discovered something troubling in the deep mathematics of the stabilization network. The technology was working, but it wasn't healing the universe. It was holding it together with permanent scaffolding. The galaxy would require active maintenance for thousands of years, maybe forever. "We didn't save the universe," he explained to Director. "We just prevented total collapse. The scars are permanent." "Then we'll maintain it permanently," replied. "That's our responsibility now." The new generation grew up in this transformed galaxy. They learned about the crisis in school, studied the mistakes that led to it, and understood the cost of arrogance. They inherited a universe that was broken but stable, damaged but safe. Young people from different species worked together on the maintenance crews, monitoring the stabilization network and repairing any problems. They didn't see each other as aliens. They were all just people trying to keep their shared home intact. The red zones remained sealed, vast regions of space where physics no longer worked correctly. Sometimes, sensors detected strange readings from within the barriers, impossible energy signatures, echoes of the lost civilizations, but nobody could enter safely, so the red zones remained mysteries. Some scientists theorized that the lost worlds might still exist inside the red zones, trapped in pocket dimensions where time flowed differently. It was a comforting thought. The idea that the 300 extinct species might somehow still be alive, just unreachable. But there was no way to know for sure. The galaxy moved forward. New colonies were established in the green zones. Children were born who never knew the terror of watching the sky tear itself apart. Trade flourished. Art and culture spread across the surviving worlds. Life continued, changed but persistent. On Unity Point in the central hall of the new government, a permanent display showed the galaxy map. Green zones marked safety. Red zones marked loss. Every citizen was required to view it once in their lifetime, to understand what had been lost and what had been saved. Beneath the display, a plaque bore Ambassador's final words to the galaxy. We walked away from the Galactic Council and the universe began to collapse. We came back and it held together. Now we must make sure it stays that way, not as saviors, not as rulers, but as partners, as equals, as the species that finally taught the galaxy that being right matters less than doing right. The stars shone on, fragile and beautiful, held together by human ingenuity and the hard-won wisdom of 1,000 species learning to work together. The galaxy hadn't ended, it had been reborn, and humanity, the youngest of the races, had midwifed its difficult birth. The universe was broken but alive, damaged but healing, and in the monitoring stations across every world, the stabilization network hummed quietly, a permanent reminder that some mistakes cannot be undone, only prevented from happening again.